You've a doctorate?
Yes, I do.
How the hell can you be a doctor and have ADHD? Would the naysayers say about you?
I think people think ADHD needs to necessarily mean bad academic career, lack of success, inattentiveness. But for me, ADHD has always been a lot more about hyperactivity, hyperstimulation, having to do 50 things at once just to keep my brain occupied.
I know that movement's really important to me, and movement physically gets things moving and stops things being stuck in my own brain. Why did you recognise that as such a priority?
I think it's both from a personal and a scientific one. From a personal perspective, I burnt out really badly a few years ago. I found that exercise was the only thing that kept me sane enough to keep going.
I think you're super successful now, but I think you're going to take that into another level. It's quite clear you've got that potential and that drive to achieve for other people what you've not achieved for yourself yet.
You cannot waste your life thinking that you owe something to someone else. You need to do things that immediately bring value to those around you, to yourself, and to the community, and that's all that matters.
Dr. Sonia Ponzo,
Hello.
thank you for joining us.
Thank you for asking me.
I'm the only one that's not a doctor sitting here.
Yeah. So, you're Italian.
I am.
We believe you've got ADHD.
Yeah, there are a lot of pointers towards that, yeah.
You've a doctorate.
Yes, I do.
How the hell can you be a doctor and have ADHD? Would the naysayers say about you? So, how's that happened?
That's a very good question. And I think one of those, preconceptions people have about ADHD is, I think people think ADHD needs to necessarily mean bad academic career, lack of success, inattentiveness. But for me, ADHD has always been a lot more about hyperactivity, hyperstimulation, having to do 50 things at once just to keep my brain occupied. But that never really meant, failing academically. If anything, I would have this, I would have exams. In Italy, you have mainly oral exams. So when you go for university, you do a lot of, get these 5 books, read all of them, then you go in front of the professor and they'll be like, this page, what does that say? And so it's kind of like a rush towards the end line. So you start reading those books about 5 days before, and then you keep reading them, and that fed my ADHD really well, to be fair. Yeah. And then when I came to the UK to do my PhD, I think it was mainly the fact that I was really interested in what I was doing. I had a lot of free reign in most of my PhD. So I could choose my topic, I could put together my experiments, I could do the hypothesis, I could do the review.
It stimulates creativity, right?
Yeah, it was absolutely lovely. There was no way for me not to be interested in what I was doing.
So actually school, right the way through to getting a PhD, you didn't struggle at all? Because we talked to a lot of people, and obviously I'm very much from a lived experience point of view, I really struggled with school, and I was made to feel thick.
Yeah.
But that's not your story at all.
No, so I arrived in primary school already knowing how to read and how to write, because my mom and my grandma took a lot of care into teaching me. And so I spent the first year reading books in a corner while the other kids were actually learning how to read and how to write. And I started kind of with a bit of a head start in a way. Throughout my nursery school years, whilst kids were sleeping, because I couldn't sleep ever, there was no way to get me to sleep. And so teachers had to find things to keep me occupied with that were silent. So they would give me things to color, things to start and read. So they would really keep me entertained for most of the day. And I think that also contributed to having a lively mind to an extent. I remember my mom told me that when I was 3 years old, she took me to the hospital because I wasn't sleeping at all. She's gone for a month where I wasn't sleeping. Mm-hmm. And I was having these headaches, and she was like, okay, something must be wrong. She might have, tumor or something bad. And they took me in, they hospitalized me for 3 weeks, and they started running all sorts of tests, EEG. They tried to put me in an MRI, gave me a sedative, obviously backfired, because that's what happens with ADHD. Typically sedatives have the opposite effect. So I started running around, wreaking havoc in the MRI room. And then they concluded, they went to my mom and they said, listen, she's hyperactive. Because that was Italy in the 90s, right? There was no ADHD. Even today, I would argue. Yeah. So, listen, she's hyperactive. Let her run around. It will go away. She'll tire out. And Mom was like, how am I supposed to live like this? How can you tell me just let her run around? So yeah, sorry, I digressed a little bit. No, good ADHD.
Absolutely.
It's invaluable.
And they say when you met a person with ADHD, you met one person with ADHD, and everybody's different. And as you were exploring, your younger years there, when John introduced that and sort of said you didn't struggle at school, we can look at compartments of that answer, can't we?
Yeah.
So bright, intelligent, and school looks to have molded itself to meet your needs as opposed to the other way around, which is what we often find, where you have to mold to the school's needs. So there's that. But then you look at your mum's concerns over your lack of sleep pattern, your very physical hyperactivity there. But of course, you're a girl.
Yeah.
Girls don't do physical hyperactivity. Girls are just dreamers in the back of the class.
Exactly.
And stereotypically, going back those years, you won't have fit the classic ADHD determination. And Italy has got a different perspective on ADHD, and sadly still has. But it's exciting to talk to you because you are not, and I don't believe anybody is, but you're not fitting the stereotypical mold of a girl with ADHD. And here you sit with your degrees, your PhD, and you've done some amazing work, which I'd like to introduce into the conversation about ADHD and the physical side. Talk to me about the app, and first of all, what's the premise of that piece of work that you've done? Because I'm excited by that.
Yeah, and I think you touched upon something interesting, because maybe, my history with physical hyperactivity impacted a lot the work that we're doing now at Outset. So Outset Wellness, the premise of it is to help people with ADHD move their bodies more. And the idea is that by moving our bodies more, we kind of get those signals that tend to be very scrambled in day-to-day life. If you talk to an ADHD, they will tell you, I don't know when I need to drink, I don't know when I need to eat, I don't know when I'm fatigued until I collapsed. And the idea is that the more we put people in a situation where they can experience their bodies, feel how they feel the heart racing, feel the breathing different, and then understand what those signals mean. And the more they will do that, the more they will feel like, hold on, this is what my body needs right now. I will be better at understanding it in the future. And the thing is that when it comes to exercise, so what Outset does really is plans exercise for you throughout the week by looking at your availability. So it plugs into your calendar, looks at the weather forecast, so to see when it's better to send you outside or keep you inside. And then there is a little algorithm that plans things for you and keeps adapting to your day, to the weather, and to what it learns from you over time. So it's not just I plan it and then off you go.
That's very personalised.
Yeah, let's just unroll that for a second.
Yes, sorry. I know I speak very fast.
And yeah, we'll go back through that with less Italian pace and less ADHD pace. But what you've said there to start the analysis of that, if I may, is because of my hyperactivity, I've created a piece of work that gets people to move more. Okay?
Yep.
So
I can explain.
We have to unpick that, don't we? Yes. So there's a logic there about you talk about is it about unlocking the paralysis of that hyperactive mind, not being able to decide what to do, and guiding the individual to an exercise program which will then provide a more refined stimulus, and one that we can predict and work with a bit more. Is that where this is going?
Yes, basically. And also the fact that, hyperactivity in itself is not necessarily the same as exercising in a sort of structured way. The thing that exercise does is it channels that hyperactivity into a moment of physical strain and then self-regulation and relaxation. So it's kind of about using that energy to harness your day-to-day to an extent.
Right.
So I jumped a few steps. That's also very ADHD.
I love
when you get to the end of it.
But there's a lived experience, because I can relate to this. There's chaos, there's overwhelm, there's procrastination. So I know I should be going for a run. It's a nice day. It'll make me feel better, but I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to do that. That's distracting me. Is that where this is coming from? So that's how you were living. I identify with that. Your whole kind of design, if you like, is to try and put structure in so that I know I need to stop now and clear the decks and go for that run to get it done and then come back to what I was doing.
Yeah, the idea there is, first of all, removing that decision fatigue layer. So you just put it there. But also the way that we designed the algorithm was basically based on me as the first power user. And it took us about 6 months to just fine tune all the parameters of the algorithm. So, okay, no, it needs to be half an hour after this. It needs to be when the weather is perfect. We try to really make it as easy as possible for people to be like, oh yeah, that's logical. That's a natural next step. I should just go. And when it works, because it does, we had a user who was like, yeah, just go and do it. It's like, I don't understand. It's just magic. Like, why didn't I do it before? But there is much more thinking behind why that activity is at that time in that moment than people realize.
I love that, coming from a proper scientific point of view. So with your own lived experience, and then dare I say now getting user feedback, you know, is there sort of one kind of cry for help, if you like, from people that are coming to you saying, and it might be retrospective, it might be, I've got to wish I'd had this earlier, wish I'd understood this earlier. Is there one thing people are really sort of identifying with?
That's a very interesting question. I never thought about it in those terms. I think one thing we realized is that when the first version of the app that we had was kind of a bit bare to an extent. So we only had the algorithm going and not much more. And people were like, I just don't see, I can't really visualize what's happening to me. I can't visualize my progress. Like I do it, but there is a missing piece. And then we had this thing where every time you move now, you grow a plant. And then that plant gets added to your garden and you start with plants that are more difficult to kill. And then you go to more difficult ones. And people love it. Not because it's like a gimmick, but because they're like, okay, I am growing with this little thing. And also because ADHDers are notoriously bad at taking care of themselves, but much better when they have to take care of something else, whatever that something is. And so we saw that added the dimension of like humanity and care to the product that wasn't there before.
I like that. And the importance of movement, just quickly on that, on the subject of movement, I know that movement's really important to me, and movement physically gets things moving and stops things being stuck in my own brain. You know, why did you recognize that as such a priority? And, you know, why has that not been recognized before? Because I understood it from a natural point of view, and I just sort of got up and tried to organize my own chaos, but you recognize it from a scientific point of view.
I think it's both from a personal and a scientific one. From a personal perspective, I burnt out really badly a few years ago. That was way before I realized about my ADHD. And I couldn't stop because I don't come from a very wealthy background, which means I didn't have the luxury to say, oh, I'll take a sabbatical. No, I need to work and I need to pay the bills. And so I found that exercise was the only thing that kept me sane enough to keep going. And when I made that connection, it was like, oh, hold on, this people need to know about this. How are we not talking about it? And then the more that I read into ADHD, exercise, and there's a lot of fascinating research about it, the more I realized that it's really about this fundamental disconnection between how my body feels on a day-to-day and my inability to know what that means. And the more that gets out of sync, because we spend a lot of time in our heads, especially with ADHD, with a lot of voices, a lot of chaos, the more we stay here, the more this gets disconnected and the more difficult it becomes to get out of paralysis and get out of your head eventually.
That's really interesting.
You're a psychologist.
Yeah.
So when we typically look at things from a psychology perspective, and I don't think you do look at things from a typical psychology perspective, we look at the nurture and the nature elements of things, don't we? But where I think you book the trend is you're looking at the nature and then looking how we can nurture that, as opposed to perhaps the other way around. Now, if we make that correlation into whole life, not just brain health, yeah. One of the things when we talk about ADHD below the neck, we talk about pre-diabetes, diabetic, poor diet, poor relationship with food, which leads to increased chance of heart disease, stroke, heart attack. We find people smoking more with ADHD, taking illicit substances to plug the gap where medication's not available, and so on. We could go on. And what you've articulated is the individual's first step towards improving their ADHD below the neck. Whereas it will help them up here with the wiring, it flows down the body, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the planting of a seed to grow a plant to feed the garden, we could interpret that as part of growth into being a better person as well. So where do you sit with that whole ADHD below the neck and the work that you've been doing as a psychologist? And I know there's a lot in that question.
Yeah.
But I think that's the genesis of where you're thinking. I don't think you're thinking about here. You're thinking about the whole person, aren't you?
Absolutely. It's very much of a holistic thing. And I love the nature versus nurture thing, because it's been kind of a bane of my life to go against the dualistic perspective of body and mind. Even though I talk about it in those terms, body and mind, same thing. Nature, nurture, same thing. So to me, environment and genetics are very much blended in the same way. I don't really see an egg and a chicken situation there, from a philosophical standpoint, but also from a scientific standpoint. And I think you're absolutely right. It's a matter of, so the reason why I say body first, it's not because I think that the body comes first, but because it is a great entry point that feels more intuitive and less rationalized. Because I think there is this problem in most ways that we look at mental health, where we tend to make everything about the cognition, we tend to make everything about awareness, we tend to make everything about, all your CBTs and all that. But the reality is that we are not brains in a vat, right? So it needs to be an integrated approach that starts with, we are embodied beings. Perception starts from here, right? So we can't really look at brain health without looking at body's health and the whole health.
I almost stumbled for my next question because I was so locked into what you said. There's so much power in what you said. And you talk about body first. And when we look at people's, we talk about shame a lot with ADHD, okay? And one of the things that we're collectively working on is removing the shame and changing the narrative, common used words for us in this context. And body shame is one of the bigger issues that we have with people with ADHD, and of course poor diet, poor health, lack of exercise, and all of those things. So your app is a web-based platform, isn't it? So it's easily accessible. Yeah. Outlet well, what's the name?
Outset Wellness.
Outset Wellness.
Yeah.
What's the ultimate goal that drove you to do that? What would the utopian I have achieved what I set out to do look like for you with that?
I love the plan set out. It was
Was there a plan?
So before I get to that, let me just comment briefly on the shame bit. I think that is very crucial to everything that we've been doing, in the sense that one of the biggest problems you encounter when you access everything around exercise is really, especially for women, this big sense of expectations. So if you exercise, you're expected to look a certain way, but also engaging with exercise and all of that carries a lot of guilt, shame, and baggage. And one of the things that we did from the very start was make it a kind of tranquil and calm experience. And if you look at the app through the design, you'll go there and most people land there and like, oh, I love how it just brings me down. It makes me feel calm. And it's not, there was a comment from one of our users who said, it's not shouty in any way. It's just, if you've done it, great. If you don't, there's tomorrow. Don't worry. It's all about getting people to feel, first of all, capable, but also not telling them off Duolingo style because they missed the session. That's not what human nature is. And going back to your question, what is the ultimate goal? I said this to myself a few months ago, and I still firmly believe it. If I change even one life with what I'm doing, I can die tomorrow. I mean, I hope not, but I can die tomorrow and be happy.
I love that.
And that happened. So
So it's a mission-based business, and I'm intrigued as a female entrepreneur. And we've had people sitting here that have been, say, in a family of four, 3 brothers and a girl. 3 brothers were all diagnosed as youngsters. No one thought to test the girl for ADHD because we already established in this conversation it wasn't a thing. To now be trailblazing, trying to not only help others with that amazing mission, but also backing yourself with self-belief. You mentioned that no one else is going to pay the bills, so there's an element of coming into this. But I want to know that sort of journey yourself in your head and how you've been received as well as a female doctor, trying to change the narrative in the ADHD space. Just I want to know that journey.
That's a good question. Right. I think to an extent, I've been very lucky in my career, in the sense that, obviously I've experienced, as any other woman throughout my career, instances where I was dismissed, but the reality is that I don't really let people dismiss me. Like it's very difficult to do that.
There's a relentlessness with you, right?
Yeah.
Even the question I asked, sorry to interrupt you, even the question I asked you haven't actually thought about that before.
No.
Because you've just gone.
Yeah.
Which is very endearing.
it's a blessing and a curse.
It's also very inspiring for anyone watching, because there are some damning stats from a female entrepreneurship point of view.
Yeah.
This whole ADHD wasn't a thing in women, so that's a really important piece that you trailblaze.
That is true. And I think, I was very lucky throughout my career to have people who always believed in me. I think one of my mentors was one of the people that first said, yeah, you have ADHD, by the way. So it was, and he has too. So it was kind of like a moment of, oh, wow. But apart from that, I think in general, more and more, I feel I have a community of other women entrepreneurs that definitely helps in terms of feeling part of something, a movement that is changing the course of how things have been so far. And I think, as much as I haven't gone through investment, and one of the reasons why is because I know mission-led businesses that are led by women are less likely to get investment, because my objective is not to become a unicorn. Of course, I want to make money because that is what pays the bill and keeps the business going. But my ultimate objective is to make an impact, to leave this world better than I found it and have a net positive impact with my life, right? And you cannot go to an investor typically and say that, because obviously what I am prioritizing is my people, is the users, is the experience. It's not and I'm not willing to compromise on that. And so we put all of our savings into this, me and my partner, we're both on the venture. And we decided to bootstrap it and hope that it would work out.
That's brilliant. Proper backing yourself and prepared to take the risk, which is a massive ADHD trait, right? Yeah. You're prepared to take that risk and put your life savings into business you believe in.
Yeah.
So one of the things I know is really important to me is movement, exercise. I try and start my day with it. And I've often had, I guess, a morning routine that works for me. And we talk to a lot of people that are successful on camera and outside of it that have their own routine. It could be start with yoga, go for a run and so on. But busy things coming to life, the holidays with kids, there's always things that can distract you.
Yeah.
Have you got any sort of advice to anyone watching, listening, where they're struggling, they're getting overwhelmed, making time, but they know it's important?
Yeah.
I know I'm better for it, but I'm not making time for it.
I think that in a way, one of the things that people tell us the most about the app that they like is that we start very simple. Walks count as well as everything else. And what we tell people is you need to get out of the all or nothing mindset. It's not like if you don't run for half an hour, that doesn't count. 5 minutes walk, fine, log it in. You did it, feel good for it. Everything needs to count. If you stretch for 5 minutes in your chair, that also counts. Log it in, get your plan to grow, feel better for it. Because this is like the tiny wins are what builds momentum and gets someone who feels overwhelmed and incapable to actually feel like, oh, I can do this, then I can do 10 minutes more, and then I can do 10 minutes.
So it's building a habit.
Yes.
Consistently.
And people with ADHD need reward.
Yeah.
They don't need telling off.
Yeah.
They'll run away from the problem then.
Yeah.
They need reward. And I think it's fascinating that you've clocked into that. Let's take it back to you for a second.
Yeah.
I'm thoroughly enjoying and fascinated by this conversation, but there's something I want to go back to because we skated over it. Yeah. And I think if we get to the end point here and we look at, you're going to be successful in whatever shape or form that's going to be. You are going to get to where you are because you can feel that drive, that passion and that capability for success. But if we peel it back, we once had a person on the television who asked the question of, do you feel any shame for having ADHD? And his answer was, no, I have no shame for having ADHD, but I am ashamed of some of the things I've done in the past, which made this harder. And I wondered what your view on your past was in that context, because if we examine what we've done in the past, may be correlated to having ADHD, but then we can see how we work through it to become successful. That's very motivational, I think, for people who are struggling. So what about you and looking back on how your ADHD has affected you and you thinking, I wish I hadn't done that or whatever?
Oh, yeah. I think my biggest one is about relationships, like with people in general. I think I've always had instances in the past where I would get very close to someone and then they would just disappear. Like without notice, just disappear. And I always left feeling like I was too much. Because I probably was. That's the truth, right? I have always had a very strong sense of justice. I was always, campaigning for things, trying to protect everybody, even if no one asked me. My mom was like, put the cross down, Jesus. Like, come on, it's not your responsibility to save anybody. But it's always been very part of me. And I think that's always been a lot to be around. And sometimes people will be like, you know what, I don't want to have to deal with that.
And that's in the context of being Italian. And if I may, Italians are perhaps stereotypically passionate and driven anyway. So you stood out even in that community then. Yeah.
Imagine here.
Well, yes. Yeah. We're a bit staid and a bit slower, aren't we? So relationships. Yeah. You struggled with those in the past then?
Yeah. I mean, I felt like a lot of shame around not having been a better friend or not having been a better person. And I still feel that today. Like I realized, you know, very, very recently when we went through the assessments for the ADHD assessment. So the form, the questionnaires. And I went through them with my partner because one of them is, I think it's the diva that asks your partner or someone close to you to give examples of your behaviors. And when I saw all of that, like put down there, like all of the, yes, she does this, yes, she does this, yes, there was no one answer that was no out of all of those. And the vivid examples, and I realized how much pressure I'm putting on him. As much as he takes like a shower, he's amazing, and he's always been, you know, he's the light of my life. But still, I'm putting him through a lot just because I'm not able to get my brain to be a little bit more well-behaved to an extent.
Yeah.
And sometimes I fully realize that the things that I do are things that I could potentially, you know, contain, right? But it just takes so much effort to be and to contain. And obviously at home, you want to be free to be yourself, but at the same time, you can't not take into consideration what you're doing to others because it's only fair, right? And so it's that level of shame in like not being the greatest partner, not being the greatest friend. That's what I regret the most, I think.
And if I asked your current partner, should you feel shame? I suspect he would say absolutely not, because I love her for who she is and what she brings into our relationship.
Yeah, no,
and for me, one of the things we've got to be very clear is that any recognition of ADHD and any treatment for ADHD is not aiming to change the person.
Yeah.
It's aiming to make their life a little bit easier. And where there is something that may be slightly impairing, whether it's in your head, in your mind, or it's a reality in other ways, it's to make that easier, isn't it? And maybe easier for him a little bit as well.
Yeah. I mean, he's absolutely lovely, and he's just the most supportive human being there is. It's, you know, absolutely nothing to say, but I realize how much pressure things put on him as well, because it's kind of like he's also carrying part of the disorder. And I think he may have ADHD very well too, in a very different way than me, but there are some strong suspicions. So obviously, you know, he's dealing with his stuff and also has to deal with mine that spills over, right?
But there's a self-awareness there. It's just the way you're talking, there's a huge amount of self-awareness. That comes with maturity and learning yourself. But in context of you mentioning your partner may well have ADHD in a different way, you know, this time a year ago, I didn't even know Phil. And we met at Ideas Fest, so I called it 11 months ago. And then I've talked quite openly about this whole entrepreneur community and almost like a tribe element of all being drawn together.
Yeah.
Is that a thing? Because I only know this from my own perspective, and I put that out there a lot, but you've got that sort of more scientific look about it and the way you're bringing people together with the app. You know, are people with ADHD almost finding each other organically through a positive vibe, through the hyper focus, through that sort of almost high intensity that goes with the traits?
That's an interesting point. I think, for instance, like I didn't really know anybody with ADHD up until very recently, until I actually started moving into the space and started, you know, getting to know people and reaching out. No one in my immediate circle has it, or at least has any, you know, confirmation of evidence. Some people have suspicions, but not much. So for me, it was very new. It was much less natural than it was for you, I think. But the moment I started putting it out there, saying I have ADHD, people start responding to it. So there is, I don't know if it is as natural, but definitely it is something that once people feel safe admitting, they tend to gravitate towards similar people. I think I lived my whole life trying to show someone something. And this is very common for other ADHDers, I know. And I think in a way, I had the luck of going through the career ladder, getting to own my own business. And in a way, from the outside, it looks like, oh, she made it. But what that did to my brain is also the freedom of, right, now you've done that, stop having to show anybody anything. You've done it. Now think about your happiness, think about your life. But I think a lot of people never get to experience that, okay, that's the end of the road, nothing has changed, nothing to show, I can be free. So I think probably trying to get out of that idea of I need to show people that I'm not, stupid. I need to show people that I'm worth something. You don't need to show anything to anybody.
That goes back to the shame, doesn't it?
Yes.
That's within you.
Yes.
Nobody's put that to you.
No.
Nobody's said to you, Sonia, you have got to go and prove something. You have got to achieve something because you're bad, you're useless, you're terrible. You felt that and you've driven that forwards. But what you said there was you're now getting to the stage of an inner karma about that, where you're feeling you don't have to prove anything anymore, but you'll carry on doing stuff, but for a different purpose. I'm glad we've got that on camera because that's hugely powerful.
Yeah, it's the self-awareness piece.
I
can relate to that in a different way of being really cruel and having really noisy voices in your head that are not nice, to then coming with maturity, coming with taking enough steps to get things achieved that then you can. So it's how can we help people that are having those voices early? And I think that's where the role model that you are, the awareness that this brings is like actually try and be nicer to yourself along the way. And
there's a kind of model in there, isn't there, of know yourself, so understand yourself, help yourself,
but sharing people,
and then understand therefore other people, and being prepared to help other people, which will then help you, which takes you back around a cycle, doesn't it? And I've never thought of it that way before, but there's a spiral up. Most spirals are articulated as a spiral down, aren't they? There's a spiral up, and we go up into the clouds and up into cleaner air and into everything, so. And
on that, the amount of energy spent and wasted on the spiral up, that if you could in any way reduce or eliminate that, you're far more effective.
Or eliminate the need to push that up.
Like, you grafted to get to where you are, but you've also battled yourself on the way.
And I'm still there. It's not done yet. But I think I think a few things happened to me this month that kind of shook me out of where I was before. I've lost the cat that I had for 13 years. She was very much a member of the family. Obviously everybody thinks differently about pets, but for me it was very woven into my routine. And then I had a little bit of a brush with death last week at the hospital. And so all of that kind of contributed to having a moment of, hold on, you could not be here tomorrow. So you cannot waste your life thinking that you owe something to someone else. You need to do things that immediately bring value to those around you, to yourself, and to the community. And that's all that matters.
No, it's powerful.
Two final things really as we start to wrap up. One is we often find that a person with ADHD will be in a relationship with a person who's got ADHD. And somehow there's a subliminal attraction in there, isn't there? You talk about the characteristics, you talk about being endearing. And they, without a doubt, they are. But to a certain element of society, they'll be the antithesis of endearing. And therefore, I do think we get a tribal attraction within a group of people. But secondly, to round out from my perspective, we've looked at school. And I think school, Italian education has been extremely beneficial for you. You got people that were able to flex and they set you up on a pathway where you could achieve your potential. Whereas for a lot of people that doesn't happen. And there's a whole lesson, interview, book, thesis in there about educating the person with ADHD. You've gone through everything in life and now here you are. I think you're super successful now, but I think you're going to take that into another level. It's quite clear you've got that potential and that drive to achieve for other people what you've not achieved for yourself yet. Yeah?
Yeah.
And
that's really well put, actually.
And my plea to you is just reflect back when you see this interview played back on actually you have been incredibly successful for you, and never lose your drive to do it for other people, but trust the fact that you're doing really well for yourself. You should have no shame about being an Italian woman with drive and passion, who's neurodivergent, got that spiciness to make a difference and drive things forwards. And I genuinely look forward to working with you in the future because I think you've got a lot to offer. This has been an amazing interview. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You almost made me cry there.